Welcome back. This is World Insight with me, Tian Wei. British architect David Chipperfield is honored with this year's Pritzker Architecture Prize, the highest award in the field. He received the Pritzker for a commitment to an architecture of understated but transformative civic presence, spanning residential, commercial, and public uses and across Asia, Europe, and North America. Sir David's work explores the integration of buildings and the environment, making the connection between tradition and innovation. For more, let's take a listen. This is an exclusive interview. Sir David, welcome to the program and congratulations for this beautiful award.
You're welcome. Nice to meet you.
I see several of your projects that are dealing with the ancient cultural heritage that we have today. So when you are working on those projects, to what degree would you be creative? How do you work with the history, work with the cultures?
Architecture belongs to a place, and therefore it also belongs not only to a physical place, but a place that has cultural references and identities. So I think it's important to see architecture as something which takes opportunity, physical opportunity from where you're building, both in terms of the place, in terms of the people, in terms of the community, in terms of the technology. So I think we're always beginning our work, our analysis with what are the opportunities or what are the challenges, the particular challenges of this place compared to anything else. And that is just as much to do with people as it is to do with the physical place itself.
Is there some examples you would like to share with us that are exciting and challenging at the same time?
Well, the projects we did in Berlin after the reunification of the city in the early 90s, which we began in 1997, was very much connected to the reunification of the city itself, and therefore very much connected to, as it were, building Berlin again. So this was an extraordinary project, which not only engaged the particular challenges of the building and the building fabric and this ruined city and this ruined building, but in a way, it dealt with the challenges of Berlin.
When an architect, Sir David, is dealing with history, I'm sure you have to read different versions of history because sometimes history comes in different versions and different packages. So how would you be able to figure out and know which one you want to stick to or which selectively you want to pick out and be able to contribute to your ideas of design?
Well, architecture is very inclusive. You know, it's an action of great collaboration. Any building involves a lot of people, not only through the construction, but through the planning and the conception. And a building has to have meaning. And in order to have meaning, it has to respond. And to use your word, to be inclusive in a way, to inclusive ideas and considerations. And those are not only intellectual concerns, but they're emotional concerns. So I think while projects like Berlin are very difficult because they are very sensitive, in a way, it also makes sure that the project has a lot of meaning. I think a lot of the problems with so much architecture doesn't have much meaning because they are just commercial towers or commercial buildings, which are more about investment than they are about making a better city. So, of course, we have the client that commissions us and pays our fees. But we also have the clients which have less voice, the people who will work in the building in the next 10, 20, 30 years. But we also have an even more invisible client, the client that passes the building every day on their way to their house, and they look at the building, or they look at buildings in the city. So we have multiple responsibilities. Our prime responsibility, of course, is to the client that commissions us. But as architects, we also have to consider the clients that have no voice, which is you and me.
An architect has to deal with a lot of different interests at the same time. You know, the people that are moving into the building later, the one who is commissioned the building, and also in which the building is being situated. What about the community around? Also governments and businesses' interests. So how would you be able to balance all of those interests and bring out the best designs?
The project has its own functionality and own requirements. The client wants to do this. That's the personal program of the investor or the institution, if it's a museum. But also, I think increasingly we have to, as architects, consider what does a building donate to the city, to the community. What is the consequences of construction, making a building? And what are the consequences in terms of environment and also in terms of community? And some buildings, it's much easier. If we do a museum is always giving something back. It's always, but if you're doing an office building, it's not quite so easy to think, what can this building give back?
You see the world is changing so fast, and people's emotions are also evolving with it over the past few years particularly. So how would you be able to catch that moment of emotion, and how sustainable the ideas in the design could be for the future?
What is architecture for? And of course, it's a business. It's wrapped up with development. So there is a big economic energy which comes through construction. And that energy has its own rules of investment and finance. It's difficult to deny those rules, because otherwise, if you don't have an economic system that instructs this process, but at the same time, that isn't enough to justify construction. You know, so we have to think: how do we build better places for ourselves? And I think you referring to the last few years, I think we've been reminded the importance of our family, our street, our neighbors, the things closer to us. And I think this is a good reminder. And I think clearly architecture is not only about beautiful buildings on the covers of magazines. It's the street which you walk to take your children to school. It's the house where you get up in the morning and you have your coffee and be with your wife. So we are making the world in a way. We are making the place which life can be lived. So how do you balance this energy which you need, this investment energy, the dynamic energy of construction and business, and that, with the more modest energy or consideration of what type of city do we want to live in? Do we have a voice in this? Are we building the cities that people like you and me want to live in? I'm not sure we are always doing that. And I can't always explain why cities are being built in a way that doesn't make us individually more comfortable. So this is a big challenge going forward. And I think that the environmental crisis means that we have to be much, much more careful. It forces us as a society to be careful, because architects can't solve everything themselves. We are only part of a societal dialogue. But I think we can bring these things to be important.
You are well known for your way of working with the environment. You make your statement for the building, but at the same time, enormous respect for the environment. Tell us, what is your way, Sir David's way?
I mean, we have been very fortunate to do a lot of public buildings, like museums and things like that. So projects like that, there is within the task, of course, the essential idea of being for a community. So a museum is, by definition, something which gives. So that's a much easier reality to deal with, much easier to reconcile these concerns. I think it's much more difficult when we get into commercial projects and to urban projects, because I think we've not trusted planning as much as we should. So we now rely on individual buildings, the quality of the individual buildings and the quality of investors. But I think we have to find, going forward, if we are going to be more careful with our resources, and our resources is not just energy or material, it's also land, it's how we plan. So we're really going to deal with the consideration of the limited resources the planet has and how we use them in construction, which is one of the big consumers of resources. Then we must engage planning in a more intelligent way. For instance, the center of our cities are becoming empty of people because the land values are so high. In the center of London, for instance, normal people can't afford to live in the center of London anymore because the land values are so high. So we have to think about, how do we control this? How do we make cities sensible in terms of transportation? If everybody spends 2 hours on a train going to work every day or on a car going to work every day, this is not a sustainable concept. So, you know, we're going to have to integrate construction and ideas of planning and what type of cities do we want and how do we want to live on a daily basis? What is the basic quality of life? I think this has to be much more integrated, and we have to be less interested in architecture as a product, as something like an object, and more interested in architecture as a process, as something which helps us design a better world.
What is it like as an architect to work in different cultural environments?
Yeah, it's a very nice question. I mean, I've had the personal advantage of working around the world, from Alaska to Japan, Korea, China, Italy, Germany, Spain. It's been an enormous privilege for me. But it's not just about doing business, because if you're a businessman, let's say I come to China and I'm selling something. I'm selling a product. I'm selling cars or something. The transaction is a business transaction. But as an architect, I'm not selling an object. I'm building something. And in order to build something in a place, you have to be in a big dialogue, and probably for 3 or 4 years. So in that process, you get to know people in Mexico. You get to know people in Shanghai. You get to know people in Tokyo. You get to know people in Seoul. You get to know people in Anchorage, Alaska. The thing is, when you are working on a project with other people, you are unified by your common task. So then the things which before maybe have separated you culturally and from experience are pushed aside, and you realize you have the same common discussions. You sit in a bar in Shanghai late at night talking to somebody, and you have a lot in common. You have a lot to share. So I've had this privilege to realize that these cultural boundaries are important, and the cultural differences are charming and exciting. You know, I wouldn't want the world to be made of people who are all thinking the same things or having different experience. You must deserve, and you must respect. It's a great honor to be asked to build something in somebody else's city, in somebody else's culture. This is an enormous honor, and it's also an enormous responsibility. And therefore, you should take it very carefully.
Sir David, our time is running up. Congratulations once again for this wonderful award, and also looking forward to see more of your designs in different parts of the world. Thank you. That's Sir David, the winner for this year's Pritzker Architecture Prize. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of my team. Thanks for being with us. Bye for now.